Authorized Piping Inspector 317. An employee of an owner, user organization, or authorized inspection agency 316 who is qualified and certified by examination under the provisions of Section 4 and Annex A and is able to perform the functions specified in API 570 where contracted or directed to do so. An NDE examiner is not required to be an authorized piping inspector. Whenever the term inspector is used in API 570, it refers to an authorized piping inspector. Auxiliary piping, instrument and machinery piping, typically small bore secondary process piping that can be isolated from primary piping systems, but is normally not isolated. Examples include flush lines, seal oil lines, analyzer lines, bounce lines, buffer gas lines, drains, and vents. Conditioning monitor locations, CMLs. Designated areas of piping systems where periodic examinations are conducted in order to assess the conditions of the piping. CMLs may contain one or more examination points and utilize multiple inspection techniques that are based on the predicted damage mechanisms. CMLs can be a single small area of a piping system, i.e. a 2-inch diameter spot, or plane through a section of pipe where examination points exist in all 4 quadrants of the plane. CMLs now include, but are not limited, were previously called TMLs. Construction code. The code or standard to which the piping system was originally built, ASME B313 would be an example. Contact point, locations at which a pipe or component rests on or against a support or other object, which may increase its susceptibility to external corrosion, fretting, wear, or deformation, especially as a result of moisture or solid collecting at the interface of the pipe and supporting member. Corrosion allowance, material thickness in excess of the minimum required thickness to allow for metal loss, corrosion, or erosion during the service life of the piping component. Corrosion allowance is not used in design strength calculations. Corrosion barrier. The corrosion allowance in FRP equipment typically composed of an inner surface and an interior layer which is specified as necessary to provide the best overall resistance to chemical attack. Corrosion rate. The rate of metal loss, reduction in thickness due to erosion, corrosion, or the chemical reaction with the environment from internal or an external damage mechanism. Corrosion specialist. A person acceptable to the owner, user, who is knowledgeable and experienced in the specific process chemistries, degradation mechanisms, material selection, material mitigation methods, corrosion monitoring techniques, and their impact on piping systems. Corrosion under insulation. External corrosion of carbon steel and low alloy piping resulting from water trapped under insulation. External chloride stress corrosion cracking of austenitic and duplex stainless steel under insulation is also classified as CUI damage. Critical check valves. Check valves in piping systems that have been identified as vital to process safety. Critical check valves are those that need to operate reliably in order to avoid the potential for hazardous events or substantial consequences that should reverse flow occur. Cyclic service refers to service conditions that may result in cyclic loading and produce fatigue damage or failure. Cyclic loading from pressure, thermal, or mechanical loads. Other cyclic loading associated with vibration may arise from sources as impact, turbulent flow, vortices, resonance and compression and compressors, and wind, or any combination therefore. Also see API ASME 579-1, ASME FFS-1, definition of cyclic service. In section I-13 in screening methods in Annex B1, as well as the definition of cyclic service conditions in ASME B313 section 300.2 definitions. Damage mechanisms. Any type of deterioration encountered in refining and chemical process industries that can result in metal loss, flaws, defects that can affect the integrity of piping systems, corrosion, cracking, erosion, dents, and other mechanical, physical, or chemical impacts. See API 571 for a comprehensive list and Description of damage mechanisms that may affect piping systems in the refinery, petrochemical, and chemical process industries. Damage rate. The rate of deterioration other than corrosion. Rate of cracking, rate of HTHA, creep rate, etc. Dead legs. Components of a piping system that normally have little or no significant flow. Some examples include blind branches, lines of normally closed block valves, lines with one-ended blank, pressurized dummy support legs, stagnant control valve bypass piping, spare pump piping, level, bridles, pressure relief, device inlet and outlet, header piping, pump trim bypass lines, high point vents, sample points, drains, bleeders, instrument connections. Dead legs also include piping that is no longer in use but still connected to the process. Defect. An imperfection of a type of magnitude exceeding the acceptable criteria. Default. An approved or document postponement of an inspection, test, or examination. Design pressure of a component. The pressure at the most severe condition of coincident internal or external pressure and temperature, minimum or maximum expecting during service. It is the same as design pressure defined in ASME B313 and other code sections, and is subject to the same rules relating to allowances for variation of pressure and temperature or both. Design temperature of a piping system component. The temperature under the coincident pressure, the greatest thickness or highest component rating is required. It is the same as the design temperature defined in ASME B313 or other code sections, and subject to the same rules relating to allowances for variations of pressure or temperature or both. Note, different components in the same piping system or circuit can have different design temperatures. In establishing this temperature, consideration should be given to the process fluid temperatures, ambient temperatures, heat, cooling, media temperatures, and insulation. Due date. The date established by the owner user in accordance with the code whereby an inspection, test, examination, or inspection recommendation falls due and is to be completed. The date may be established by rule-based inspection methodologies, fixed intervals, retirement half-life intervals, retirement date, risk-based methodologies, target date, fitness for service analysis results, owner-user inspection agency practices, procedures, guidelines, or any combination thereof. Examination point, record point, measurement point, test point, recording point, measurement point, test point. A specific location on a piping system to obtain a repeatable thickness measurement for the purpose of establishing an accurate corrosion rate. CMLs may contain multiple examination points. Test point is a term no longer in use as test. In this code, refer to mechanical or physical tests, tensile tests, or pressure tests. Examinations. The act of performing any type of NDE for the purpose of data collection or quality control function performed by examiners. Examiners would be typically those actions conducted by NDE personnel, welding or coating inspectors, but may also be conducted by authorized piping inspectors. Examiner is a person who assists the inspector by performing specific NDE on the piping system components and evaluates to the applicable acceptable criteria where qualified to do so, but does not evaluate the results of these examinations in accordance with API 570 requirements, unless specifically trained and authorized to do so by the owner user. External inspection, a visual inspection performed on the outside of the pipe to locate external issues that could impact the piping system's ability to maintain pressure integrity. External inspections are also intended to find conditions that compromise the integrity of the coating and insulation covering, and supporting structures and attachments. Stanchions, pipe support, shoes, hangers, instruments, and small branch connections. 313. Fitness for service evaluation. An engineering methodology whereby flaws and other deterioration damages contained within piping systems are addressed in order to determine the structural integrity of the piping for continued service. API 579.1, ASME FFS 1. Fitting. Piping component usually associated with a branch connection a change in direction, or a change in piping diameter. Flanges are not considered fittings. Flammable material, as used in this code, includes all fluids which will support combustion. Refer to NFPA 704 for guidance on classifying fluids in 634. Some regulatory documents include separate definitions of flammables and combustibles based on the flash point. In this document, flammable is used to describe both, and the flash point, boiling point, auto ignition, temperature, or other properties are used in addition to better describe the hazard. Flash point. The lowest temperature at which a flammable product emits enough vapor to form an ignitable mixture in air, i.e. gasoline flash point is about negative 45 degrees. Diesel's flash point varies from about 125 to 200 degrees. Ignition sources require the cause of ignition above the flash point, but below the auto ignition in temperature. Flaw. An imperfection in the piping system, usually detected by NDE, which may or may not be detected depending upon the applied acceptance criteria. General corrosion. Corrosion that is distributed more or less uniformly all over the surface of the piping as opposed to being localized in nature. Hold point. A point in the repair or alteration process beyond which work may not proceed until the required inspection examination has been performed or verified. Imperfection. Flaws or other discontinuities known during inspection that may be subject to acceptance criteria during an engineering and inspection analysis. Indication. A response or evidence resulting from the application of non-destructive evaluation technique. Industry qualified UT angle beam examiner, a person who possesses an ultrasonic angle beam qualification from API QUTE, QUSE detection and sizing test, or equivalent qualification approved by the user owner. Injection point. Injection points are locations where steam, chemicals, or process additives are introduced into a process stream at a relatively low flow volume rates as compared to the flow volume rate of the parent stream. Corrosion inhibitors, neutralizers, process antifoulants, desalter, demulsifiers, oxygen scavengers, caustic, water washes are often most recognized as requiring attention in designing the point of injection. Process additives, chemicals, and water are injected into the process streams in order to achieve specific process objectives. Injection points do not include locations where two process streams join. A31. Those are mixing points. Chlorating agents and reformers, water injection overhead systems, polysulfide injection and catalytic cracking wet gas, anti-foam injections, inhibitors, and neutralizers. In service designates a piping system that has been placed in operation as opposed to new construction prior to being placed in service or retired. A piping system not currently in operation due to process outage is considered to be in service. The operational stage of a piping system life cycle that commences upon initial commissioning and ends when the piping system is finally retired from service or abandoned in place. Note 1 does not include piping systems that are still under construction or in transport to a site prior to being placed in service, or piping systems that have been retired. Piping systems that are not currently in operation due to temporary outages of process, turnaround, or other maintenance activities are considered to be in service. Installed spare piping is also considered in service, whereas spare piping that is not installed is not considered in service. In-service inspection. All inspection activities associated with piping after it has been initially placed in service but before it has been retired. Inspection. The external, internal, or on-stream evaluation, or any combination of the three of piping conditions conducted by the authorized inspector or his or her designee. NDE may be conducted by examiners at the discretion of the responsible authorized piping inspector and become part of the inspection process. But the responsible authorized piping inspector shall review and approve the results. Inspection code. Shortened title for the code. API 570. Inspection plan. A document set of action strategies detailed the scope, extent, methods, and timings of specific inspection activities in order to determine the condition of a piping system circuit based on defined expected damage. Inspector. An authorized piping inspector per the inspection code. Integrity operating window. Establishes a limit for process variables, parameters that can affect the integrity of the equipment if the process operation deviates from the established limits for a predetermined amount of time. C 4314.